discuss the different theorems on limits. So the first theorems on limits is the limit of the identity function. So when we have the limit of x as x approaches to c, it would be equal to c. So on our first theorem, we call that one as the limit of identity function. We have the limit of x as x approaches to 3. Of course, the answer would be simply equal to the value of c, which is equal to 3. So yung answer natin dito would be equal to 3. Next theorem is the constant rule. So if we have the limit of k as x approaches c, it would be equal to k, in which k is a real number. And yung second theorem naman natin is what we call the constant rule. So if we're going to get the limit of a constant number as it approaches a certain number, or letter c natin dito, the answer will be always equal to the constant. So suppose we have the limit of 5 as x approaches 1/2. So in this case, yung sagot natin would be equal to the constant na given, which is 5. And next, limit of 4 as x approaches to 2. So the answer is simply 4. And lastly, the limit of 10 as x approaches to 2. So yung magiging sagot natin is again yung constant. So the answer here is 10. Next theorem, we have the sum rule. The limit of the sum of two functions is the sum of their limits. Limit of f of x plus g of x as x approaches c is just equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches c plus the limit of g of x as x approaches c. So sa sum rule, all we need to do is to get the limit of each term, then after that one, we're going to add their limits. So suppose we have the limit of the quantity x plus 7 as x approaches to 3. So mapapansin natin, dalawa yung terms natin dito, si x at saka si 7. So pwede muna natin silang hiwalayin. So we have the limit of x as x approaches 3. And i-add natin kung ano man yung magiging result dito sa next term natin na the limit of 7 as x approaches 3. So, kukunin natin yung bawat limits nila, then after that one, pag nakuha na natin, that's the time we're going to combine or add them. So, limit of x as x approaches to 3. Again, pag ito yung given natin, this would be the limit of identity function, right? So, we have the variable. So, yung magiging sagot niya is yung number na ina-approach natin sa limit. So, the limit of x as x approaches to 3 is simply equal to 3. And based naman sa second theorem natin, if we're going to get the limit of a constant, then its answer is simply equal to the given constant. So the limit of 7 as x approaches to 3 is just equal to 7. So ngayon, nakuha na natin yung limits ng dalawang terms. So after that one, we're going to combine them. So 3 plus 7 is equal to 10. Therefore, our answer is equal to 10. Next rule, we call this one as the difference rule. So the limit of the difference of two functions is the difference of their limits. The limit of f of x minus g of x as x approaches to c is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches c minus the limit of g of x as x approaches c. Ang difference rule ay halos kaparehas lang ng sum rule. All we need to do is to get the limit of each term, and after that one, we're going to subtract them. So we have here the limit of the quantity of x minus square root of 2 as x approaches 0.1. So yung dalawang terms natin ay si x at si negative square root of 2. So kukunin natin yung limits nilang dalawa. So we can separate them. First would be yung first term natin na x. So the limit of x as x approaches 0.1 minus the limit of square root of 2 as x approaches 0.1. So again, dito sa sa unang term natin, ipa-follow lang natin yung limit of identity function. So if you have here a variable, then yung magiging limit niya or answer niya would be the number na ina-approach niya. So we have 0.1. So the limit of x as x approaches 0.1 is equal to 0.1. Now how about this one? Limit of square root of 2 as x approaches 0.1. So dito, ipa-follow natin yung constant rule. So yung constant natin is square root of 2. Therefore, yung answer natin dito would be simply equal to square root of 2. So we have minus square root of 2. Then, isi-simplify lang natin. We're going to combine them. So we have 0.1 minus square root of 2. So this would be roughly equal to negative 0.3142. Fifth theorem, we have the product of a constant and a function. The constant k can be factored outside of a limit. So we have limit of k times f of x as x approaches to c is equal to k times the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. So we have here two examples. Suppose we have the limit of 6x as x approaches positive 4. So kung mapapansin natin, we have a constant and a function x. So pag ito yung magiging sitwasyon natin, we're going to make use of the theorem about product of a constant and a function. All we need to do is to factor outside yung constant or yung given constant natin. So in this case, it would be written as 6. 6 yung constant natin. Then multiply natin siya dun sa limit ng function. So yung natirang function na lang natin is si x. So the limit of x as x approaches positive 4. Then simplify natin, it would be 6 times. So again, gagamitan natin ng limit of an identity function. So ang magiging sagot dito would be equal to 4. Now since na-simplify na natin silang dalawa, then we're going to get their product. So 6 times 4 is equal to 24. So our final answer is equal to 24. Next, we have the limit of 2x as x approaches 3. Again, yung constant natin dito is si 2. Yung function naman natin ay si x. So, using the product of a constant and a function, we can factor outside yung constant. So, ilalagay natin sa labas yung constant na 2 times yung limit ng function natin na x in which x approaches to 3. Bring down lang natin si 2 times, yung sagot naman natin dito sa the limit of x as x approaches 3 is just equal to 3. So, finally 2 times 3 is equal to 6 and this would be our final answer. Sixth theorem, we have the product rule. The limit of a product of two functions is the product of their limits. Limit of f of x times g of x as x approaches c is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches to c times the limit of g of x as x approaches to c. So sa product rule, we are given two or more functions. So in this case, we have two functions, yung x at yung x minus 1. So sabi sa product rule, para makuha natin yung sagot, we simply get the limit of the first function, then we're going to multiply it to the limit of the second function. So, kukunin natin yung limits nila separately. So, same na siya ng process ng sum rule at ng difference rule natin. So, we have the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1 times the limit of x minus 1 or minus 11 as x approaches to negative 1. And if we're going to notice it, yung second function natin, we have x minus 11. So in this case, sa x minus 11, pwede rin natin i-apply yung difference rule natin. So pwede natin kunin yung limit ni x at yung limit naman ni negative 11. So, we can rewrite this one as the limit of x as x approaches negative 1 times the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1 minus the limit of 11 as x approaches to negative 1. Okay, yung negative 11, dito natin nilagay si minus. Okay, kasi nga subtraction sila. So, you can simplify this one. Limit of x as x approaches to negative 1 using the limit of the identity function. So, pag variable lang yung given natin dito, yung sagot natin is yung sa c. So, we have negative 1. So, the answer here is negative 1 times yung product ng dalawang terms natin dito. So, we have the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1. So, same lang dito. The answer would be equal to negative 1. Next, the limit of positive 11 as x approaches to negative 1. So, since this is constant, so our answer here is just equal to the given constant, which is 11. So, it will become minus 11. And simplify lang natin, we have negative 1 times, pwede natin dilagay ng dot. So, negative 1 minus 11 is negative 12. And finally, we're going to get their product. Then the final answer is positive 12.